Greetings, fifth grade community. Welcome to the February webinar where we are showing some love for our social studies. Today is Valentine's Day if you are joining us live, but if you are joining us later, we are glad that you joined us for this session. My name is Sandy Price and I am the virtual specialist for the fifth grade webinar. This is a picture I love. If you watched before, I'm sorry, my son, I think it's precious. So this is my chance to brag as a mama. But we got to have muffins for mom this month. So I don't know if your school's been doing something fun, but this was a great way for us to reach out to our community. And I was excited to be one of the parents for that. So again, as we get started for today, my name is Sandy Price and I am from Cherokee County, but excited to be here to serve you as the virtual specialist for fifth grade. Today's agenda has to do, I kind of stuck with the theme of Valentine's Day, and we are going to deal with the breakup first, and then we're going to deal with the checkup. We're going to talk about great reads. We're going to share some ideas, and then we are going to look into next month, and then what will be taking place in our future webinars. All right, so let me play one of my favorite songs for you. All right, so I don't know if you could pick up with that or not, but it takes me back to listening to good old oldies music. And it says breaking up is hard to do. But what we know is that the more that we break up or break down our standards, the easier it actually becomes. So today we are going to do, in true Valentine, or hopefully not your Valentine experience, a good old break up or breakdown of the standard SS5H6. So for some of us, this might be right where you are, right where you're about to be, or maybe just where you finished up. The standard says to describe the importance of key people, events, and developments between 1950 to 1975. Then if you look at the standard elements, you would analyze the effects of Jim Crow laws and practices, explain the key events and people of the civil rights movement, which would include Brown versus the Board of Education 1954, Montgomery bus boycott, March on Washington, Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Activities of Thurgood Marshall, Lyndon B. Johnson, Cesar Chavez, Rosa Parks, and Martin Luther King Jr. Then you would describe the impact on American society of the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, and Martin Luther King Jr., and then discuss the significance of the technologies of television and space exploration. So when we start to break up or break down the standard, we're asking ourselves, what is the standard asking students to do? So we want to look at the content knowledge. And ultimately what we do is we look through that standard at what it is that our students need to know. What is the knowledge they need to have? What are the nouns? What are the different events that take place in there that we need them to know? So we kind of do that when we get all that together. But what's important for us to know is it's not just that our students have to define these. A lot of times we say, oh, this is what they need to know. I see Jim Crow laws. What are Jim Crow laws? Oh, I see Brown versus the Board of Education. What was the Brown versus Board of Education? Or I see Thurgood Marshall. Who was Thurgood Marshall? We're not just focusing on their entire lives all the time. A lot of times we're focusing on a specific aspect or how they relate to something. You'll notice with Thurgood Marshall, it wants to know how he dealt with the civil rights activities. Lyndon B. Johnson, how he dealt with civil rights, and it goes on through the other people. So knowing about them is important, but a lot of times we might go through an entire biography on this person's life when in theory we really just need to know their impact on something in particular, and we're limited on time. A lot of times that is important. Same thing when you look at standards or element C, you see describe the impact on American society of the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy. You could talk a lot about Kennedy, but ultimately what we need to know is how his assassination affected American society, along with Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. Again, people that did a lot of different things, but in fifth grade, ultimately we need to talk about their impact. We need to know who they were and why they were important to this time period. So it kind of helps give us a focus. When you start looking at cognitive demand, it's the level to which students need to know something. So if we analyze, let's see, we're not just Jim Crow, but analyze effects of Jim Crow, we aren't just saying what were Jim Crow laws, but we're talking about how that affected people's lives. We're looking closely at what life was like because of the Jim Crow laws and how that affected different regions of our country. We're explaining events and people of the civil rights movement. Describing, again, like we said, the impact of the assassination, and then discussing the significance of television in space. Not just what year was television invented, not just what year do we go into space, but why was this significant? Again, taking it further, again, we might get caught up in that content knowledge of define, or tell who, but we need to go further with it. So again, breaking down our standard to the cognitive demand that's required, and then also looking at it in context. So we can see that we are talking about the civil rights movement through this standard, and then the changes in our society during this time period. All right. So the other thing I want to hit on is the checkup. So my brain always laugh when I'm thinking of lessons with my students because it goes to my life. So this year I had my annual checkup. And so what's the first thing that you have to do for your annual checkup is you have to have your lab work done. And so they make you go in and get your lab work so that the doctor knows what they're talking about when they sit down with you to say how you're doing. So I kind of think of this next thing that we're going to talk about as like your annual checkup, maybe with your doctor. Think about it as you want to do it because you want to be healthy. That's the reason you do a checkup, is because you want to continue to stay healthy, to know things are going well. I think of this as like our checkup. So find a peer, someone in your building. This isn't an administrator. This is just someone, again, a fellow teacher, to come in and just scope out the cognitive demand of your questioning. They're coming into your class. You might give them a kind of basic checklist where they could be looking at the different DOK levels that you might want them to, to track. So you might refer to the DOK wheel or the Hess matrix, whatever you find to be most helpful as you go through different DOK questionings. And so you would possibly make a chart that might have DOK level 1, DOK level 2, DOK level 3. Obviously, we can't assess 4 because 4 would be our extended thinking, and that's something that would take days to do. That's extended, maybe a project or a performance task over time. But maybe make a chart of your DOK level 1, your recall questions, your DOK level 2, basic reasonings, and DOK level 3, which would be your more complex questions. You might want to provide the stems for the person coming just to help them if they're not as familiar with the different levels. You could track how many times you ask those questions, and you could even have them track how many times the students ask those questions of you. Are we encouraging our students to think deeper, or are they just wanting basic recall facts there? How many did you ask? How many did the students ask? You could think along with that. Before you do this, you might want to talk to your principal about having a time to set this up. Maybe this is someone that could come during one of their planning periods to do it. Again, this is not evaluative. This is simply good teaching. It's reflective teaching. It's having someone come in and gather data that we might not be able to do. I mean, yes, if you want to record yourself and do this, you could, but I even think having someone to discuss it with is helpful, where they notice, hey, was I calling on the same kid the whole time? Or was the same kid answering my questions? Or how could I have worded that question differently to get a deeper level questioning from our students? So again, when you go in to get before your checkup, you get all that lab work done so that when you go and you meet with the doctor, they're able to provide you with the information. Like, hey, here's what your blood showed. Here's how you are health-wise. Now, our peer is not our doctor. We know that, and we are not trying to say, come in and tell me all the things that I did wrong, or come in and tell me all the ways, as a doctor, to change what I eat, or all the ways to exercise more, or something like that. We are really just having a discussion with them. So what we want to think about is it'd be like going in and having your blood drawn, but never going back to find out your results. Or having your doctor tell you that, hey, you have high cholesterol, but you don't do anything about it. You don't change your diet. You don't come up with a plan of action. So what we want to think is then when we take those numbers, how do we make that checkup from our peer formative? How do we do something with it? So we might go through some reflective types questionings. How should I change my practice? If I look at the tally or the data that they collected, am I asking too many recall questions? Do I never do recall questions? Because we know there's a place for that. We need to kind of build up as we go. We need to build some basic understanding, and then to deepen their level of understanding, we will ask those higher level questions to check for that. We know that ultimately when we are assessing at DOK, we might be teaching through Bloom's. It gets kind of confusing there, but if we're checking for their understanding, we want to check for their understanding at different levels on that DOK. Am I asking the same student the same questions, or is that just the same one that continues to answer? Do I have enough pause time? That's one thing that I know for me as a teacher, a lot of the times I have to tell myself to stop, to pause, to take it in, let the students have a moment to answer, because a lot of times I'll just ask a question and then I find myself answering it on my own. What are some action steps? If DOK questions don't come naturally to you, which for me in the beginning they did not, I would take that DOK wheel and I would write out questions. As I've had student teachers in the past that were just getting used to DOK, that was also a step I told them that I told them to take. I really think that until we are very familiar with them, it just doesn't come natural. So make yourself a list to hold yourself accountable for asking those different leveled questions ahead of time. Selected answering, possibly random answering, having ways that we get all of our students involved in it. Maybe we do some we do and then you do. Like I may model some of that questioning and then have them come back with some of the questioning ideas there. Or maybe I have them respond in different formats and styles. A one-word answer is probably going to be a recall. So I may need to have some different formats. I might need some short responses. I might need talking discussion formats. I might need to provide my students with answering stems just to get them prepared for this type of format. Again, use your peer, have these types of discussions. Maybe this is something your grade level wants to do. Maybe this is something that your PLC within your building, if you're departmentalized, wants to do for social studies. Just be thinking of ways that you can incorporate in this peer observation tool just to help you grow and to help your peers grow. All right, so some great reads. What I want to do is share with you some different ways that you can teach using short stories. So again, this is the time period that you may be in right now is the civil rights movement. And I want to share with you a few books. If you have these in your school library, awesome. Maybe you have them in a guided reading library. Maybe you have them in your actual media center. Maybe your media specialist can help you get these books. Worst case scenario, you can even check on YouTube and find if there's a reading of it already on there for you. So I want to share with you a couple books. The first book has very powerful book and has amazing illustrations. I actually won this book at the Georgia Council for Social Studies when I went over the summer. Very excited to get it in my hands. The book is called Freedom Summer. Just a quick synopsis for you. It says Joe and Henry are a lot alike. They both like shooting marbles. They want to be firemen and they both love to swim. But there's one important way they're different. Joe is white and John Henry is black. And in the South in 1964, that means John Henry isn't allowed to do everything his best friend is. Then a law is passed that forbids segregation and opens the town pool to everyone. Joe and John Henry are so excited they race each other there, only to discover that it takes more than a new law to change people's hearts. Great illustrations, great discussion. This may be a way, if you are also the ELA teacher, that you connect the two, possibly a read aloud. I know Lester Laminack, if you've followed any of his studies on read aloud, maybe you do a movie read the first time where you just let the students soak it in. It's a beautiful story, and if we stop and pause throughout the entire story, we are going to keep our kids from truly experiencing all that is there. So we might want to lay a little groundwork ahead of time, or maybe we just open up and read and then have time to reflect and possibly read again. Again, a way to bridge ELA and social studies and let our students really gain a deeper understanding through literature of that time period. Another book is Satchel Paige. This was a book that we had in our guided reading room. Again, not sure where you have for that. This one really goes into Jim Crow laws and dealing with that. Again, keep in mind that as we start dealing with these, you may encounter some language that are wordings you need to prepare your students for. I encourage you, preview books before you do them with your students, and then prepare your students in appropriate ways for language that they might hear that echoes the time period. But, you know, having those discussions with them on what may have been used at the time and then how that's not appropriate now. But Satchel Paige, Striking Out Jim Crow. This is actually a graphic novel. So, you know, for some of your students, this may really draw them in just because of the the way that the text is set up. So great graphic novel for you to get in the hands of your students if you feel it is appropriate for them and guiding them in that. This one is very popular. You've probably seen this one, Martin's Big Words. Another great way to teach Martin Luther King Jr. The message of his life, to teach segregation, to teach the changes that took place. Again, dealing with his assassination, how that would impact, because that's how the story actually ends, is with that. So wonderful picture book that you can share with your students that really gets across the message of the time period. Another one is Rosa. This book also has very strong, powerful illustrations throughout it. I really think that this is even a chance to teach through picture and to be able to go through that, going through her life, going through the impact that she made on the civil rights movement. Great information in there in the story called Rosa. Another one that's popular hits on the story of Ruby Bridges, or on the life of Ruby Bridges, called Through My Eyes. This is one that I would probably encourage you, if you were doing it, to pick an excerpt. Again, a lot of times we pick up books and feel like we need to read the entire book to our students. That's not true. We might be able to find a page or two, an image from there that we could share. And again, part of it that hits on what it is that we are trying to teach. Same with Watson's Go to Birmingham. If you look at a book like that, that may not be, you may not have time to do the entire novel, but it may be a book that you would be able to share parts from. All right. And then for you to be thinking about what are some books that work for you on different time periods. Just to throw out from another one, I've shared this in a past webinar. Baseball Saved Us was a great way for me to incorporate literature into my classroom and to teach about Japanese internment camps in the United States during World War II. Shooting the Moon is another novel that my students love as we're doing the Cold War time period. This hits on the Vietnam War. I do strongly encourage you to make sure you preview that book ahead of time. It hits on a couple things in a couple chapters that I would not want my students to have out at their desk, but could be something that you, if you want to do that book, email me or send me a personal message and I will kind of let you know what's in those. Again, it's not awful content, but when you're dealing with 5th grade, it might be something that you wanted just to read aloud that chapter and skip over a sentence or two. But great understanding of the time period during that novel. Out of the Dust is another one. You're probably familiar with that, by Karen Hess. Another way to really allow your students to experience the time period. I would encourage you, if you're not, if you don't have time to read the whole novel, which you very likely don't, this is one that you can actually take this and read from it. It has different sections. This one is called Devoured, and it obviously is dealing with the Dust Bowl. It says, Doc sent me outside to get water. The day was so hot. The house was so hot. As I came out the door, I saw the cloud descending. It whirled like 1,000 engines. It shifted shape as it came, settling first over Daddy's wheat. Grasshoppers, eating tassels, leaves, stalks, then coming closer to the house, eating Ma's garden, the fence post, the laundry on the line, and then the grasshoppers came right over me. Descending on Ma's apple trees, I climbed into the trees, opening scabs on my tender hands, grasshoppers clinging to me. I tried beating them away, but the grasshoppers ate every leaf. They ate every piece of fruit, nothing left but a couple apple cores hanging from Ma's trees. I couldn't tell her, couldn't bring myself to say her apples were gone. I never had a chance. Ma died that day, giving birth to my brother. August 1934. Wow, that right there opens up wonderful discussion with your students of the Dust Bowl time period, of what was going on, and even, you know, I mean, taking into character and going into your ELA class and what you could experience with that excerpt as well. So lots of ways to bridge between the two. We talked about Squirrel last month, the speaking, writing, illustrating, listening, or reading and listening, all the ways that we can incorporate the two subjects. The more we do it, the better our students understand it. So if you have books that work for you, I would really encourage you to, I will start a blog after this. I'm gonna make a note so that I remember to do that. I will start a blog after this on our EdWeb page, and I would love for you to add in books that help you teach time period and then to state what they are. Because I think as we're getting to also review for milestones, this is a great way through a short picture book to, if we've already taught it, you're able to jog their memory on that time period and encourage discussion around it. All right, another thing, if you are new to us, you may not know about all the resources that are out there. So if you have not been to georgiastandards.org, I strongly encourage you to go there. If you go to georgiastandards.org, you click on the Georgia Standards of Excellence. You choose Social Studies, K-5, 5th grade. And then just a quick rundown again, your standards are at the top. The teacher notes, which are extremely valuable so that you develop understanding. Again, these are not notes for your students. These are for you as a teacher to build background. There are multiple videos on here. These, again, are for teacher background knowledge. These are not for students to watch. They are for you to build your content understanding. And then at the bottom, you have the sample units that are out there along with source sets. These are wonderful, wonderful resources. You will see, actually, looks like 7 and 8 are not up yet. 6 is up, and then it looks like 9 is up too. So I strongly encourage you to check these out. Wonderful instructional ideas for you there of having our students use the inquiry, or for you as a teacher to encourage the inquiry-based model and not just stand and deliver, but having our students be active thinkers in the process. Also, edweb.net. If you are not part of our edweb community, I would like to invite you to join us there. Through that, that is where we will actually open up this blog to share different books that you use in your classroom. So if you would like to join our community, let me go ahead and log in really fast so you can see where we are. We are the 5th grade social studies, browse communities. EdWeb, if you've not joined before, is free. Sorry, my communities. edweb.net is free with your educator email address. We are the Georgia DOE 5th grade social studies. Here you can find resources in our resource library. And then our Ed Webinar archives is where you can find previous webinars that we have done. Under assignments, you can find some ready to go activities that are there for your students. And the blog right here is where we will open up a new blog for us to share books you use in the social studies classroom. So I will finish getting that up and ready for you in a little while, but I do hope that you will add titles that you use so that we have more resources available for everyone. Just so you know, for our future webinars at 3 p.m. will be The Luck of a Historian. April the 18th at 3 p.m. will be April Showers Brings the Milestones. As you either finish up the milestones or in the midst of the milestones, wherever you are with that, that's where we'll be on April the 18th. And on May the 9th, we'll make our final strides into the end of the school year with our final webinar. So I hope that you will join us again. Thank you so much to those of you that joined us live today. If you came in a little late, we will be posting this up on the EdWeb page later for you to see. It'll also be on the Georgia DOE links there for you as well. So thank you so much for being here. Does anybody that is live have questions or comments they would like to add before we close out for the day?
If you have any questions, you can type them in the question feature, or if you want to click on the raise your hand icon, I can unmute your mic and you can ask your question or have your comment there.
Okay. All right, I do want to say thank you for joining us on Valentine's Day. I know you probably have other exciting things to do, or you are exhausted from a day of dealing with students that have been sneaking candy all over the place for the day. So thank you for joining us live, those of you that are with us. Thank you to those of you that are watching us either in the comfort of your home, in your classroom, in your PJs, wherever you are tuning in. Thank you so much for being with us today.
And again, thank you for joining us. But Sandy, I want to say thank you to you. Great ideas, and I loved all the titles that you shared for the books to go with the standards that we're teaching for the rest. Well, not the rest of the year, but some that we're doing right now. But I also loved all your suggestions for the questions because I'm the same way as you. When um, a lot of times, if I felt like myself, I wasn't asking higher level questions, I made sure I had them written out as well, just so that I become more familiar with them. So thank you for sharing that reminder with us about checking that part of our instruction. And we look forward to being with you next month. And thank you again. It was awesome.
Thank you so much. I hope y'all have a wonderful evening.